Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.
Srila Prabhupada writes, when he left, only 5 people were there to see him off. A Mr. Bhagavati, a Mr. Sen Gupta, the Dwarwan of the Scindia steamship lines, Mr. Ali, and his son, his smallest son, Vrindavan Chandra Dey. That was his send-off. Later on, I asked his son, Vrindavan, what were you thinking when your father, just going on 70 years old, was walking up the steps to the Jaladuta, all alone, carrying only 40 rupees, and not knowing anyone to help him? His son told me with tears in his eyes, I was proud of my father.
The first time I met Srila Prabhupada was in 1974 in San Francisco. I had joined in 1973, as Maharaj said, and then I had washed pots for a while, and then was asked to distribute books. And anyway, I was part of the book team in San Francisco, and at that time, around 1973, Prabhupada really started pushing book distribution in a big way. It was no longer kirtan on the street as much as we was emphasizing book distribution. Everyone should go out to distribute books, because he was saying in Los Angeles, he was giving lectures, Tadvag Visargo Janataga Viplavo Yasmin Pratishlokam Abhadyavatyapi Namanyanantasya Yashon Kitanya Shinvanti Gayanti Granantya Sarava. That if someone comes in touch with this Bhagavat, it's not an ordinary thing. If they read one word or one line, or if they even touch the book, their life will be changed because it's so powerful. And he was instilling in young people who are just walking in the door the faith in this by seeing Srila Prabhupada's demeanor, by hearing the sweetness of his voice, by being taken up in his energy. Then armies of devotees were going out to distribute books around that time. And when Srila Prabhupada came to San Francisco, our temple president, oh, that's it, introduced the Sankirtan party, the book distribution party, to Srila Prabhupada in his room in San Francisco. And Bhaktidas said, these are the book distributors. They're going out every day. They're sacrificing so much to go out and sell your books, and they're selling so many books. And we were listening, thinking, oh, this is nice. And then Srila Prabhupada said, you must also read the books. And then he preached for about 20 minutes about how he wanted every one of his disciples to take full advantage of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Every word, he said, I've translated from Sanskrit into English. I've painstakingly translated these books for your benefit, because I want you all to become pure devotees. And at that time, I could see that Srila Prabhupada's real interest was for us to come up, to actually become very serious, can be completely serious about Krishna consciousness and take full advantage of the process of Krishna consciousness. And from that, I've always been inspired that although Prabhupada's pushing book distribution, and this is very pleasing to him, that we must take full advantage of everything he's given us to come to the highest platform of Krishna consciousness by taking the process seriously. And since Siddhanta Prabhu is here, has been asking me to tell the story a million times, this is the last thing I'll say, just because he wants it on tape. Anyway, in 1975, at the opening of the Krishna Balarama Mandir, I was here with the party that I was with Tripurari Maharaj and Suradas, and there was a group of us working for the BBT party. In any case, Prabhupada did the first artik for Krishna Balaram. And after that, then there was an opportunity for the devotees who would do the first artik. And so Tripurari Maharaj was ambitious. He pushed his way in the Pujari room and he said, he grabbed Suradas and he grabbed me and he said, we're doing it. And Bhagavan came in and he pushed him away. He said, no, we were here first. And Gurudas came in and he said, no, we were here first. And we were saying, Maharaj, just let him do it. Because we really weren't trained up so much in Pujari work. We had done a little bit here and there, but we were mostly doing book distribution. So in any case, we had to wait till Srila Prabhupada came in and then the doors would open and we'd do the artik. And so that's what happened. We went in and before we went in, the Pujari who had been up for 3 days came and said, this better be good because all the biggest pundits from all over Vrindavan will be here. Srila Prabhupada will be watching personally, of course, and you want to make a good impression. So we were very nervous, and we waited, and finally Srila Prabhupada came for darshan. We opened the doors, and we walked to the front where all the paraphernalia was, and I froze, because I had never seen such paraphernalia. Long ghee wicks. I've seen small ghee wicks before, long ghee wicks, and all types of different paraphernalia, and washing the conch outside the room and everything like that. So when the artik started, also we had never done a simultaneous artik. That's very difficult in and of itself if you've never done it. So we were there, and then
Were you doing Krishna Balaram?
I was at Radhashama Sundar's altar. Tripurari Maharaj was at Krishna Balaram's altar, and Suradas was at Gaur-Nitai's altar. And there was a fan going over Gaur-Nitai's altar that no one could find the switch for, because the temple had just been built and it was going full speed. So he could barely do anything there with the chamara and lighting anything. And then Srila Prabhupada came in, he offered obeisance to Gaur-Nitai, Krishna Balaram, and he came to Radhashama Sundar's altar and stood there. And then, of course, all the GBC men and all the sannyasis, they stood behind Srila Prabhupada. And I turned around to look while I was offering the incense and practically fainted because Prabhupada was standing right there. Anyway, it went from bad to worse as I continued to fumble through the process, and I was thinking the whole time that Srila Prabhupada may ask me to burn my Brahman's thread afterwards. I really thought that. And I think when I turned around, I threw the water and it hit Tamal Krishna Maharaj square in the glasses, and he was, I could see he was furious. So after the program, after the artik, we came into the Pujari room, and Tripurari Maharaj said, now is the time to pray for forgiveness. And I went to the dark recesses of my room that I could find and thought that I would stay there for a long time and pray for forgiveness. But the point is that after the artik, Prabhupada had gone back to his room. This is the story we got from Rameshwar, who had gone back there, and Srila Prabhupada said, who is this doing artik? And they said, Prabhupada, these were Tripurari Maharaj and his men, Prabhupada. He said, they don't know much about puja, but they distribute your books. And Prabhupada said, well, that is all right. That's what he told us when he came back. So anyway, after that time, I felt even more gratitude for Srila Prabhupada's mercy, and I also took it upon myself to learn how to do puja.
And then when everything, kirtan was over and everything was over, Prabhupada said the Premadwani prayers. And then he told us, it is very nice that tonight we have with us these two Prabhus here, pointing at the deities, Gaur-Nitai deities. There is a very nice song. Can you please follow me? So without having the time to get kartals or mridanga, Prabhupada started to sing. And the song is of Lochandas Thakur, you all know, Paramo Koruna Pahundvijana Nitai Gaura Chandra Tabavatar Sarashiromani Kevala Ananda Kanda. Very beautiful song. But as soon as Prabhupada said the first two words, Paramo Koruna, his voice shocked. He couldn't sing anymore. No? And he closed his eyes and laid his head back into the Vyasasana, and we could see tears gliding out, down his face, lotus face. And all the room was silent completely. And we don't know how long that lasted, but it was like an eternal moment. Entered the temple room, and everything was, still in ecstasy. Watching the pure devotee having such a wonderful exhibition of his ecstasy, his love for Gaur Nitai. And then gradually Prabhupada came back to the external consciousness. Still, we could see he was affected by spiritual emotions. And he said, Paramo Karuna, so merciful. Because if Krishna will come, like in previous incarnation, to kill the demons, practically speaking, nobody will be left in Kali Yuga. So he told us, in Kali Yuga, the demoniac spirit and the devotee spirit is in the same body. So Lord Chaitanya didn't came to kill demons, he came to kill the demoniac spirit in the people by the Sankirtan movement and by the association of devotees. And at the end he told us, now you are very fortunate, now you must make others fortunate too. And he told us, if you chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 regulative principles, and preach, I assure you, in this same lifetime, you will see Krishna face to face. Some people may say, well, generally it takes more than that to see Krishna face to face. But because Prabhupada promised that, Krishna surely will have to make his word correct.
It was in 1976, it was in a room conversation. I asked Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, what is the benefit that the flowers get when you offer them to Krishna or your spiritual master? And Srila Prabhupada replied, every flower you offer to your spiritual master or to Krishna, the plant the flower came from becomes a human being in his next life. So my Sankirtan began.
My initiation was, of course, a wonderful moment. And it was kind of one of those moments that Shruti describes where you're just so bewildered you can't remember even your own name. It was that kind of a feeling. The first time ever to be in front of Srila Prabhupada. I don't know anyone who's ever been to Nirvanavan, down in the old farm in Bahulaban. There was, the main temple building was an old farmhouse, and just across the driveway was Kirtananda's cabin, so there were some steps leading up to the cabin. They put Prabhupada's Vyasasana about halfway up the stairs on a landing. So to go up and get your beads from Prabhupada, you had to climb up these stairs. It was very dramatic. Because you felt like you were climbing Sumeru. I mean, it was just, that moment was so awesome. So the night before, Narada Muni had said something kind of funny like, and you better get a nice name from Srila Prabhupada. So I said, oh, well, yeah, I hope so. I'll try. What can I say? So I went up there, and the sound system was not so good. It was like a very reverberation, and when you were standing in front of His Divine Grace, you could sort of just barely hear him speaking, but because of the echoing, you couldn't really hear what he was saying. So, and on top of that, just being so stunned, practically. So I thought that I heard him say my name as Rasalila, but I wasn't sure, and then I heard all the devotees were like gasping and cheering. But it wasn't just that, it was the fact that when Prabhupada said my name, we had been studying Krishna book very intensely in those days. We used to have the Krishna bowl So all the devotees would study Krishna book rather diligently, and we'd have these contests and answering questions and quizzing each other, and it was a really nice way to occupy our time. When Prabhupada spoke my name, I actually had the experience of what he describes in he was describing the gopis as being like thunder, clouds, snow, and lightning. And that passage just flashed in my mind. It was like an experiential moment when he said my name, and even though I didn't actually know that he said it, I wasn't positive, that was what I experienced. And so I was just walked down the stairs kind of stunned, and what did Prabhupada say my name is? So it was just an incredible moment, one of those things that Prabhupada can actually reveal the spiritual world to you in a moment. That's his potency. Thank you very much.
My only, what could be called personal association, I mean in the sense of like one-on-one exchange, with Prabhupada was when I got to get my Brahminical initiation. And I'd been waiting a few days because Prabhupada gave so many people all at once initiation. This was here in Vrindavan in 1976. So after several days, I got in to be with Prabhupada. Pushta Krishna was his secretary, and I'd been waiting there all morning, as I'd been there for the last few mornings, and he just wanted to cut it just before me. So he saw I looked a little disappointed, so he said, okay, go in. Then we'd been, myself and one godbrother, we joined pretty much at the same time. We were going out on book distribution together, and we were close friends. He left his body about 2 years ago, Satyavak Prabhu. So we'd heard things here and there about, see, in those days there weren't so many books translated, and it was mostly Prabhupada's books that we knew anything from, and weren't so many books written. And we just used to hear little snippets of things here and there that might be in some Shastra. And we heard we'd heard, or Satyavak had heard, that from Hari Bhakti Vilas it says you should face in this direction at this time of day when you say your...
Satyavaki was British?
Yeah.
He passed away?
He passed away maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So you should face in a certain direction in the morning, another direction in the evening, another direction at night, and when you're saying a Gayatri. And you should say it specifically at this time, so many minutes before the sunrise, or so many minutes after. And you should hold it at the throat or something like that at the morning, or something, I can't remember, in the chest at midday, like this. There are so many detailed rules of how to do it. So we thought, well, this is very interesting and far out, as the language was in those days. So I thought, well, if I get a chance, I'd like to ask Prabhupada about this. So anyway, I went in, and Prabhupada had me pronounce the words, and I thought I knew how to pronounce Sanskrit quite nicely, so I read the sheet out, and every word I said wrong, and Prabhupada was correcting me. And then after the first mantra, Prabhupada just gave up trying to correct me, and just, whatever I said, he just let it go on. So then he saw this saying, he said, you chant this mantra morning, noon, and evening. Do you have any questions? So I wanted to ask about this, that I'd heard that you should chant exactly so many minutes before the sunrise, or so many minutes after it, like that. So I said, Prabhupada is... And then I was going to ask about which direction to face in, to confirm all these things we'd heard, and then which direction your thumb should be facing. I don't know what it was exactly. So anyway, I asked Prabhupada, is there any exact time is there any particular time for chanting? And Prabhupada just told me you chant morning, noon, and evening. So he said, yes, chant morning, noon, and evening. So then again I asked that, but Prabhupada, is there any exact particular time? Prabhupada looked at me and said, morning, noon, and evening. So I didn't think to ask all those other questions about which direction you should be facing in. I just said, yes, Prabhupada. I offered my obeisances and left.
In Montreal, there was one devotee. His name was Dayal Nitai. He was a yogi. He was a yogi. And he was into health and And he was criticizing that we're eating white rice, white sugar, and butter.
Mm.
You know, it should be brown rice. It should be, you know, it's a brown sugar type thing. No butter. Yogi diet. A few beans. These things are not right, and so on. So one, and he was very strong about this. So Prabhupada was in Montreal, and Prabhupada's apartment was a few blocks away from the temple, and they had no car. Prabhupada had to walk from his apartment to the temple. So one day after giving the class, we were going back with Prabhupada to his apartment. So I was walking next to Prabhupada, and this devotee was complaining to Prabhupada about the food. It's not healthy. We're all going to get sick. So then Prabhupada stopped and said, "You see Brahmananda here? He's been eating this food for so long. Does he look sick?" So he didn't get the message. So he went on about the health thing and this and that and what is involved, how the way these foods are made and what they do and so on. And this should not be done and have to change it. So we walked for some long, and then Prabhupada stopped and said, "You know, our Brahmananda here, he's so healthy, and he can kill you. If I just say, he can kill you." So I was shocked. What's Prabhupada doing here? So I got ready. Prabhupada says, so then the devotee understood that Krishna is okay.
At the time in New York, the temple president in New York was Bhavananda. And just a few weeks before that, he had initiated an all-night Harinam Sankirtan party. All night. Till they were going to Broadway. Bhavananda was really into Broadway. And so they'd go out all night and come back for Mangalarti and then take rest. But because they didn't want to stay up that late, Mangalarti was moved up. So instead of being at 4:30, it was 3:45 or something like that. So for that reason, we had to move the waking of the deities up to way early too. So Prabhupada came in, and there was the greeting of the deities, and he was standing at the altar looking for some time, and he was speaking with Bhavananda, and we were wondering what's Prabhupada saying there. So later we found out Prabhupada said, Krishna is looking tired. Krishna is looking tired. He's playing all day with the cowherd boys. He needs his proper rest. Now, he had just arrived, and I don't think anybody told him what was about this all-night Harinam Sankirtan party, which was a little questionable anyway. So then we moved the Mangalarti back to 4:30.
So one morning when Srila Prabhupada woke up, this is a nice pastime exhibiting, as we all know, is the fact. The pure devotee is not under the influence of the modes of material nature. When he sleeps, it's not in ignorance. It's just another time when he is engaged in Krishna's service. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj was there, and Srila Prabhupada woke up, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj helped raise him up, and then immediately Prabhupada began preaching very enthusiastically with a loud voice, saying, I want you to go to the West and preach. Ask these people, do you want to grow old? No. You are forced to grow old. Do you think I want to get old? Nobody wants to grow old, but this is the laws of nature. You are forced. You must surrender to Krishna if you want to become free of this birth, death, disease, and old age. So seeing Srila Prabhupada wake up and in 1 second, in 1 moment, preaching on the transcendental platform, and to my contaminated vision, it looked like he had been meditating this way during his sleep, how he would be preaching, how he wanted his disciples to carry on.
So Prabhupada called me, and I went there, pay my obeisance, everything, And Prabhupada gave me Japamala and said the name. The name is Jagat Chakshurdas. And Prabhupada started to explain the meaning of the name. And after explaining the meaning of the name, how we should feel the eye of the Lord, watching us and looking at us, he looked at me straight in the eyes and pointing his finger, he said, you cannot hide from the eyes of God. I said, oh my God, I wanted the earth to open up and swallow me up there. Because everybody was watching at me. Maybe he did something wrong. And actually, before getting initiated, sometimes I used to go to the kitchen and steal some mahasweet, thinking nobody's watching me, and hide somewhere to eat it. And when Prabhupada told me that, I felt caught immediately. Prabhupada read my mind, he knows everything about me. So, anyway, and next day, I came back from Sankirtan a little early, and I passed through the garden, and Prabhupada was sitting on his rocking chair chanting japa. I forgot that I was not supposed to pass through his garden, but I paid my visit and I was going to go back, and Prabhupada just waved at me like that. So I went there and asked me, from where are you coming? I said, Prabhupada, I was distributing your books. We were very enthusiastic to do it because we knew Prabhupada was looking at the city, blessing all the people of South America, Venezuela there. So Prabhupada, and how people like my books in Venezuela. And I told Prabhupada, people here are simple but pious. As soon as they read the book, they like them and they want to buy them more and more. Prabhupada moved his head like he was satisfied and told me, come, I have to give you something. So I followed him to his room, and he had in his table a tray full of sweets. And he took one and gave it to me and told me, thank you very much for helping me. And I was crying actually, because I was moved. It was a new devotee, Prabhupada showing so much mercy, And then I thought, he's telling me, I don't have to steal it, he will give it to me this way. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Guru Premanandi. Haribol.
In Juhu, in 73, when I got there, we had a small temple. Because we were living very austere. We can't believe how austere we were living. Anyways, there was this half-moon fence in front of the temple. And inside this fence, there were 14 or 15 Tulsi Devis growing. So one day in the morning, I wasn't aware that the Tulsis were dying. So anyways, one day in the morning walk, Srila Prabhupada asked me, the Tulsis are dying. Why are the Tulsis dying? And I said, I don't know. And I said, I will do some research. So that day I went over to the Tulsis and I started digging around, and I found the termites were eating the roots, and there were ants all around her and everything. So the next morning on the morning walk, I told Srila Prabhupada that the ants and the termites were eating at the roots. And Srila Prabhupada said, you take 1 part lime, 1 part sulfur, and you mix it with 10 parts of water. You sprinkle it all around Tulsi Devi, and the ants will go away. So I started to do that, and then Prabhupada went on his world tour. But while he was gone, all the Tulsis died. So I made some nice beads for myself. I took the fence down, and now there was only dirt there. The Tulsis that were there for the deities, Rasa Rasa Bihari, were gone. So then Prabhupada came back from his world tour, and it was during Guru Puja. I remember it was the 5 ghee lamps, we were doing the 5 ghee lamps. So I walked up to Srila Prabhupada and gave him his flower, and he said, where are the Tulsis? And I said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, I tried to save them, but, you know, they all left the planet. So I just immediately offered my obeisances and kind of slithered out of the temple without getting chastised in the middle of Guru Puja. So then the next morning, the morning walk was coming out, and Srila Prabhupada stops everybody in front of the big garden that I had done, and I had 54 Tulsi Devis growing in there. Well, Srila Prabhupada asked me, how are these Tulsis doing? I said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, they're doing very well. There's all these spider mites and aphids and bugs crawling all over. And he said, you leave the insects alone. Let them eat as much as they want. Who are you to kill them?
I was at a rainbow gathering. Does any of you know what is rainbow gathering? It is when whatever remnants of the hippie generation still exists, they go into a deep forest every year, about 20,000 of them, and just live in the jungles. And we were cooking prasad for about 3,000-4,000 people a night, and having dramas and kirtans and lectures. So I was serving prasad one day, and this man, he looked about 65 years old. He had long gray matted hair and a long gray beard. And that was the only clothes he was wearing. He was completely naked. I thought, is this some sadhu from Himalayas? And as I was giving him halava, he said, are you a disciple of Swamiji? I said, Prabhupada. He said, yes, I know Swamiji. He is my friend. I said, how do you know? He said, 1965, Dr. Mishra's yoga classes. I was going. Dr. Mishra would not allow him to speak. He would sit in the back and pray on his beads. And I would go back to meet him. And he would say to me, whatever Dr. Mishra is saying is all nonsense. And I would invite Swamiji to my house. And sometimes he would invite me to the little tiny flat he was staying. And he would cook for me. And he would serve me. And he would teach me about Krishna. The kindest, most gentle, most loving man I've ever met in my life. So this is how Prabhupada lived. And although Dr. Mishra and Srila Prabhupada had very, very strong philosophical debates, when Dr. Mishra was sick, he was actually dying, Prabhupada, according to Dr. Mishra's own words, by his love and kindness, he fed me and cared for me back to health. Swamiji saved my life. Although philosophically Srila Prabhupada was adamantly opposed to the beliefs of Dr. Mishra, he still saw within his heart a pure spirit soul, a part of Krishna, and still showed him love and compassion.
Some of his god brothers and Gaudiya Mat sannyasis came to visit him in his room. By this time, he was simply lying down on the bed, basically just laying on the bed. He would ask to be turned over. He had not eaten for a long, long time. He had said, now I am finished with eating. I've conquered sleeping. There's no question of sex life. Now all material activities finished. And he also asked the devotees, why do you pray for me to stay? This bag of bones is useless. Devotees don't like to see the film of his last day. They don't really like to see so many pictures of Srila Prabhupada in these Antya Leela. But this is the Goswami that our spiritual master was. He stayed here for us, only so we would develop more and more attachment to him. He said as much to Bhavananda Maharaj at the time. It is my duty to draw this attachment from you for me. But the pastime I was going to say, the sannyasis came, and Srila Prabhupada was asked to be propped up on the pillow, and he said, please excuse my not being able to properly receive you. And there were some exchanges there. And he said, please forgive me for all my offenses. He said, sometimes in preaching there are some strong words that are spoken, and I would like to ask for forgiveness. And of course, they appropriately responded, no, 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 there's been no offense. The offense is ours. Please forgive us. And then they began talking in Bengali. And later I asked one Bengali devotee, one devotee who spoke Bengali, what did he say? And I believed what he shared with me because it was in the same mood. But he said, also please forgive my devotees. Sometimes they think they're the only devotees. I've had time to teach them prachar, but not achar, meaning preaching. That is the essence. What else could he do in the short time that he had with us? He had to send out this army of monkeys and simply ask us to spread the glories of Lord Chaitanya via book distribution, Harinam, and all the other wonderful activities of ISKCON. But he said, I didn't have time to preach them the etiquette, so sometimes we are very rusty in that regard, and not so good. But anyway, the humility is what I am making the point of trying to glorify Srila Prabhupada. No offense on his part. Every move, every thought, every word dictated by the Supreme Lord, and only out of compassion for us was he remaining here in those last months. And sometimes, raised a Christian, they say, oh, they glorify Jesus Christ, he died for our sins. Because my love was really secured for Srila Prabhupada during those last months. I like to think how actually his glories is that he kindly chose to stay with us longer than it was certainly convenient. Maharaj Radhanath Swami was talking about the sacrifices he made. It's nice to hear how many devotees, there are a number of devotees who were here in the last days, but anybody who saw or heard Kaviraj, the doctor, saying, simply lying on the bed with no body fat left from not eating, it was like the nerves, it was like being on fire. Just the skin and the nerves rubbing against the bone. Did Srila Prabhupada complain once? No. Did he ask for morphine for the pain? No. He simply wanted to be with his devotees and have us chant Hare Krishna. And I do have to squeeze this in. It was mentioned, but to me it's such an important aspect of Srila Prabhupada's love for us, all of us. He wanted all of us to be here for this passing. He asked that, the instruction was given, we readied canopies on top of the Gurukula building, Fogo Ashram there. He wanted all of his disciples to be with him. He loves us so much. He doesn't forget any single service. We've heard the most insignificant things that we've done, devotees shared that they've done for Prabhupada in his Jai. And that is Srila Prabhupada. How can we give up his service? How can we turn away from him or forget him? We owe him everything. Thank you.
So in 1975, it was Bhaktisiddhanta's disappearance day, and I was in charge of the kitchen in Bombay. So we were making 108 preparations, for the ceremony. So I made 98 of the 108 preparations. So they were all taken up to Srila Prabhupada, and Gopal Krishna, who was a young brahmachari at that time, he came up to me and said, well, Shankadas, you made all these preparations. You have to come up to Srila Prabhupada and tell him what you made. So I went up with Gopal Krishna, and it was Gopal Krishna, Prabhupada, and myself sitting in the room. And in front of Prabhupada was a table with 108 preparations. So Prabhupada said, what is this preparation? And I told him what it was, and he tasted it. He said, what is this preparation? I told him what it was, and he tasted it. He said, what is this preparation? I told him what it was, and he tasted it. And he said, what is this preparation? I told him what it was, and he tasted it. Then the fifth preparation, he said, what is this preparation? I told him what it was, and he tasted it. And he said, Radharani has prepared this feast. You can go.
Wow.
And then, I'll tell you a few chastisements that I got, which are pretty significant. Actually, all the pastimes that I had with Srila Prabhupada have a significant meaning to them. Anyways, one day, Mother Palika asked me to go to Buleshwar to buy fruits for Srila Prabhupada. So, I went down to Buleshwar, and I started buying fruits, and then I seen this big pile of oranges. I said, wow, beautiful oranges, Masumbi. So I asked the guy to cut one open, and I tasted it, and it tasted real good, and I figured, wow, these are great. So I bought a whole big bag of oranges for Srila Prabhupada. So I guess it was about 3 days later. I went on a lot of morning walks, and this particular morning walk, It was towards the end of the morning walk, and we were walking, and there was this building, this house on top of this hill at the end of the beach, and the sun was reflecting on the glass windows, and Srila Prabhupada started talking about how the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world like that. And then he said, "Who has bought me these oranges?" So I immediately go running up all puffed up and thinking, oh God, I'm going to get glorified. And I walked up and I said, Srila Prabhupada, I bought the oranges. And Srila Prabhupada said, those oranges are 10th class, just like you. And then he said the reason the oranges were 10th class is because they would pick them during the ripe season, and then they would put them in refrigerators and bring them out when the off-season came, and they would sell them for a high price. Then one time I was asked to make samosas for Srila Prabhupada. So I had this recipe for 5 vegetable samosas. It's a Gujarati recipe. So I grated up all the vegetables and I made this beautiful filling. It took me a long time to make it. And then I rolled out the puris and I flipped over the puris and I made like, a half moon samosas. They were like this big. So I made 35 of them. And I sent them up to Srila Prabhupada. So a couple days went by and I'd seen Brahmananda Swami, he was Prabhupada's secretary. And I said, oh, Brahmananda, how did Srila Prabhupada like the samosas? He didn't touch them. So then Harikesh, he was a brahmachari at that time, we were good friends. He said, well, why don't you come up and cook lunch with Srila Prabhupada with me? So we were cooking lunch, and this Indian gentleman had come before we started cooking and had made this big feast because Srila Prabhupada was going to have all these guests come over and eat lunch with him. Then this one man, he had made a whole pile of samosas, but they were the little diamond samosas, the little ones that you get here in India. And they were just sitting there on this plate. So me and Harikesh were sitting there, we were just having a good old time, cooking Prabhupada's lunch, and Srila Prabhupada comes walking in the room. We offer our obeisances, and Srila Prabhupada looked at me and he said, did you make these samosas? I said, oh no, Srila Prabhupada, that India I cooked before I was in here, I came and made them. He says, you don't know how to make samosas, you don't know how to make footballs! And then Srila Prabhupada looked at Harikesh Swami and he looked at me and said, you two are expert in messing everything up. Then he walked out of the room smiling, and then I served him his lunch for 2 days in a row.
And I remember one pastime where I was in the garden. We were reading from, after chanting, reading from first canto Srimad Bhagavatam. And I'd forgotten exactly what verse it was, but they were reading the Sanskrit translation verse and purport. And they read the word for words and came to the word Muni. And we all know what Muni means. Well, the word for word translation was a verb. It wasn't a noun. Muni being a person, a sadhu, a thoughtful person. It was a verb. And Srila Prabhupada said, read that again. And so they read Muni and said the verb that was there. And he said, who has done this? And then the devotees realized, who has changed this? Who is that rascal? And of course, some Prabhu's name was mentioned. He said, this will ruin our movement. You change one word on my books and it can ruin the movement. And he was so emphatic and heavy about this point. And of course, I want it to be understood as I understand it anyway. I share that. I don't want it to be misunderstood what I'm saying. I offer all respects to the Prabhus who have service doing the books, who are editors, who've been given that service by Srila Prabhupada. Dravida Prabhu in particular was mentioned today, glorified appropriately. But what I understood is we can't change the message of the spiritual master. There's such a great danger in that. Don't change anything, and we all know that instruction of Srila Prabhupada, and I got to see personally how fiery Srila Prabhupada was in making this point.
So after a while, I was talking with Tamal Krishna one time in the garden, and he said, Shankadas, you're a gardener, so you should offer Prabhupada a flower every day. So I became Prabhupada's flower boy. Every time I'd see Srila Prabhupada, I would give him a flower. Sometimes he would touch my hand taking the flower. Sometimes he would grab the flower and, start chastising me, or sometimes he would grab it and he would glorify me. He would glorify the flowers. No, he did. He really did. He said, Mogra is the king of flowers. So I went to Mayapur. Third class, of course, Giriraj was very, reluctant to give anybody, money for anything, so he gave me a third-class ticket on a train to Calcutta. And so by the time I got to Calcutta, they stole my suitcase, they stole my shoes. All I had on was a dhoti and a kurta when I got to the temple. And I was all completely full of dirt from 3 days on the train, because I went the slowest train, you know, and the cheapest way to go. Anyways, I got to Mayapur finally. So they were coming down from the morning walk, and then Bhavananda Goswami goes up to Prabhupada and says, "Oh, Prabhupada, your gardener from Bombay is here." So Prabhupada didn't say anything, and we went on the morning walk, and we were walking around Mayapur, you know, we went to Bhaktisiddhanta's temple, and we were walking back. And so as we were going back, there's this archway before you get, there was only one building in Mayapur at this time, and there was this archway, and you go into the archway, and on the left-hand side, there were some cows. And I didn't know anything about cows, so I went over and started fooling around with the cows, you know, and everyone was going towards the temple. And then maybe about 500 yards before they got to the temple, Prabhupada stops everybody. He turns around and says, "Shankar, come here." So I go running up and says, "Srila Prabhupada, what would you like?" He says, "I want you to plant trees on both sides of the road here." So Jayapataka Maharaj, 2 Bengali boys, and myself, we went around digging up coconut trees all over Mayapur, and we planted them down that pathway. And today, those coconut trees are giving coconuts. They survive floods and disasters, and they're still going.
So I'm actually very, very thankful to be here, even though I don't know why or how I got here. It's been very, very wonderful to hear all the Srila Prabhupada's disciples speaking, as it is every year. This is my favorite day in the year, actually, tomorrow, Srila Prabhupada's Disappearance Day. Because on that day, Prabhupada is fully present through remembrances of him and through the presence of his disciples. Yesterday when I came in the morning in the pandal, and I sat down and I saw the banner, 25 years of service in separation. Then in my mind what came is that for me, it is a lifetime of service in separation, because I'm a grand disciple, and so I never saw Srila Prabhupada. I never met him, and I joined in '84, and so it was many years already that he had left. So it's a lifetime of service in separation. In 1996, I was very, very touched by a CD, some songs that came out for Srila Prabhupada's centennial, a garland of songs that was produced somewhere in England. And one devotee named Jayadev Das, he sang one heart-rendering song, "I Never Knew You." And I just cried. Because we worked, I was part of the team that somehow helped celebrating Srila Prabhupada's centennial. And when this record came out, I just felt this was a culmination of, it was a reward for us to hear all the glorifications of Srila Prabhupada. And this song, "I Never Knew You," where was I when you were on the planet? I meditated a lot on that. And many times it has already come to my mind, many times, that one day, I mean it may happen or not, because I may die anytime, but by calculations of regular time, I already thought that one day there will be this horrible announcement during Mangal Arati that the last Prabhupada disciple has left the planet. And I already apprehend that day when there will be no more Prabhupada disciples. As we have heard, Bhakti-Vikas Maharaj, I think, is the one who was saying that when Prabhupada was on the planet, it was very nice because he was staying in London, and the devotees used to travel back and forth from England, from India to America, and they would get the stories. So for us grand disciples, it's like that. That when there is a Prabhupada disciple, we get the stories. We get to hear things like the stories of the flower boy or the bathroom scrubbing, and we get to hear all these little things that we don't find in the books, that we don't even find in the tapes. And so we get to love Srila Prabhupada. Krishna gave us Srimad Bhagavatam, all kinds of stories about him, so that by hearing about his personality, we develop not just knowledge of him and knowledge of his teachings, but actually attraction for his own personality, for his person, for what he is, because unless there is love, Prabhupada explains, there's no way we can fix the mind on something we don't love. If there's no love, we cannot fix. So we must love Srila Prabhupada. And one of the ways to love him is to hear all these beautiful stories about him. Some are very significant. Actually, they are all important and significant because they teach us the heart of the pure devotee, the concern of the pure devotee, and they melt our reluctance to surrender to a person.
Hare Krishna.